And it is my pleasure to present a longtime friend I've known since 1990, Phil Tagami. Phil, great to have you here, man. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, Zenny. Thank you.
You guys, an honor to have you here. Hey, Phil, you've been around Oakland a long time. You've seen Oakland from a
hey, everybody. Welcome to the
different
show.
Directions.
And it is my pleasure,
on top of all that,
to present a longtime.
We've got a situation where we're in a pandemic, as you know. And I remember the last time we were in a situation that was something like this was after, I don't even think it's fair to say it's something like this, Phil, but when after the Oscar Grant murder and businesses, it seemed like businesses were shutting down and people were staying away from downtown. You organized a dinner at Pecan to really get people back and active in Oakland. And a lot of people still remember that. I certainly do. So from that perspective, in terms of what we've suffered in Oakland and fared, where are we now?
Well, I would first say that I want to respect the fact that this is a pandemic, so it's global. So, you know, there are those who may think under certain circumstances they would get on a plane and fly somewhere, go on vacation. There's no there to go to. So we're here. So we're left to face, I think, some larger underlying conditions. There's also the notion that someone's personal choice not to take the pandemic seriously puts a lot of other people at risk. And the downside is what we're talking about, and I think the governor of New York's probably said it best, is we're talking about death. So to be mindful and respectful, the public health officials have given us their best protocol to follow, trying to keep us safe and try to promote, to the extent practical, public welfare. I think a lot of the laws we have in our society and a lot of the rules and a lot of the process and system that's adopted is to do that, is to promote general welfare, public health, and look after folks. So I would say that in Alameda County, it's Dr. Pan, P-A-N. She's got a very tough job right now, in as much as I think that the governor's office is looking to have the specific mechanics of reopening put in the hands of public health officials. Everyone's given the governor very high marks for how he's handled this. And those public health officials, I'm sure, are consulting each other to discuss what are the best practices for any number of different types of businesses and how those businesses can operate. And it will then be up for each individual business to determine if they can do so commercially viably or not, and how to approach their communication with their employees, with their landlord, with their lender, or their business partners, to figure out if that's an operation they can continue, or if they need to modify that operation, and then what should be done to allow that to occur. We're in that conversation in our business, both on the commercial real estate and development side of the world, on the operation of the railroad side of the world, as well as me owning a yoga studio in downtown Oakland, where I'm actually speaking to you from, where we have done our best to continue to pay all of our employees 30 days past the shutdown order, where we were applied for and were successful in getting a PPP loan to make sure that we could continue to pay those employees, where we've continued to pay rent, where we, again, will probably be putting some employees on furlough, and then other employees we continue to employ through live streaming, umeyoga.com, for those who are interested, where we still provide yoga, where people can go take a yoga class while they're at home and do it online, and do a lot of effort to reach out to our members to let them know that we're here for them when it's time to come back, but we don't know when that will be, and we don't know what rules will be imposed to make that safe. And until we can say that, we can't open our doors and we can't tell people what it will be. So I think that there's always a degree of frustration that comes with not knowing, but then you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person who has to make that decision. And I think people want to get it right. because as a society, we can be pretty unforgiving when someone gets it wrong. So to our leaders, and again, I would say that in this case, if we say, well, what's the city doing? Well, again, the mayor's been doing her broadcasts, some of which you've referred to and covered in your regular posts. The council president has been doing some broadcasts. Council member Kolb from District 1 sent me a message saying that he'd been doing his broadcast as well. You have to commend everyone who's doing the outreach and giving people that thing to listen to, and also providing them opportunity to give some feedback. It's not all going to be constructive, but generally the concept you would hope is that the dialogue would be constructive. Easy to identify problems, hard to suggest the solution and be accountable for what the outcome is. So in this regard, we're holding out the best hope that in short order, we will be given a set of rules to follow so we can make that evaluation of our staffing size, what our occupancy level it is, what equipment would be required, what changes in how we operate need to be instituted, literally the adoption of the plan that I could have ready for someone to inspect that demonstrates compliance. And could I then get a number or a permit that demonstrates that we have a plan in place and it meets a reasonable standard, so I can then tell our customers we're open for business? That's a question.
Sure. Is the payroll protection program enough to make a difference? Reason I ask is because it was said in one report, which I haven't confirmed, that only 35% of the applied businesses have received them. I'm proud to say Zenny 62 Media is one of those that has been treated properly by it, as well as yours. But how is it treating Oakland?
Well, I can only speak for myself. In the case of Ume Yoga, we just literally yesterday celebrated our 4th anniversary. So we've been in business here for 4 years open.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The construction effort to get open was a little bit longer than that, of course, but open for 4 years now. So we were an established business that had an established banking relationship with a bank that was cooperating and participating with the SBA. So that gave us a little bit of a head start. For other businesses that were banking somewhere where they didn't have a SBA relationship and weren't underwriting those types of programs, it was a bigger threshold, if you will. And then other banks that had well-established customers had such a run on the process, as you probably read and heard, the system couldn't handle the number of requests. So we count ourselves as lucky. I would say the program was helpful, but again, helpful for 2 months,
right,
not helpful for 5 months. So we have to evaluate what we're doing in the context of the longer term. I've run a number of scenarios for this business, and we're keeping in regular communication with our employees and members. We could probably increase that communication, and will, now that I hear myself say it. But sending someone a message that says, hey, look, you still have your job and we're still going to pay you, that's great. When you say to somebody, hey, you have a job, but we're going to only pay you half, that's different. When you say you have a job, but we can't pay you at all, now you've set somebody's world sideways if that's the only income they've had. So I think we have to be very careful, and I'd say thoughtful on how we approach that. But we can't, operate long with no income. I've spoken to dozens of people in the food and beverage industry, restaurant owners, servers, bartenders, sommeliers, and they're really struggling. And so in that context, I would say, I'm grateful to have the business partners that I have, to have the banking relationship that I have, and to have the ability to live stream yoga classes for the yoga business. On the development side of the house, in most cases, it's okay. On the landlord side of the house, we need to be flexible. We've had a number of tenants express to us their inability to pay rent because they can't operate their business and can't bring in income. And again, we don't have any residential tenants. I have commercial tenants, businesses. And so some tenants have paid half the rent. Some tenants have paid all the rent. Some tenants have said, hey, let's extend the rent and extend the lease, sorry, and let's tack this onto the end, but we can't pay you this month or next. Let's work something out. So it's not a one size fits all, but the dialogue's there and the communication's there. If someone calls and initiates the communication, it's a lot easier to find a path versus someone who's not answering the phone. And certainly there's a psychological impact to what's happened, where some people are in a state of depression or panic, where they don't know how to answer the phone, be it a customer looking for an order, be it a landlord trying to call, or even a friend or loved one who's trying to reach them. And I think we need to be sensitive to that as well. So this is a very serious thing that we're going through. My feelings on it have evolved and will continue to evolve, and trying to keep an open mind.
When you say, well, two things. You say your feelings have evolved. How? But I also want to gauge your response to something that I've noticed. A lot of my friends and people that I'm in business with say, I'm okay. And that's a great thing. But in the context of some other conversations I've had, it's those folks are not okay. How can we bridge that gap where we stop saying just, I'm okay, as opposed to, and I have to give you credit. You did this on Facebook. You said, hey, look, if anyone needs grocery, I'll come by, I'll help you. How do we get to a point where all of us are saying, hey, look, how can I help you? As opposed to, hey, I'm okay. As opposed to, hey, you may be, blah, 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 but I'm cool, right? You know what I mean?
I would say that for everyone, it's different. You've heard me for years say, thinking is good, feeling is important, and belief is very personal. And so I would also add to that, the closer was always, and not knowing is not good. So I would accept my ignorance, and I don't think ignorance is a bad word. It's basically just clarifying that you may not be aware, and you have an opportunity to cure your ignorance every day. So I would like to think I wake up every day with the opportunity to learn something I didn't know before, and try to keep an open mind to a different view or perspective. And I have some strong views and opinions, and I express them probably more than I should. But I'm also open to someone who's got different information and maybe a different perspective. And if I can learn from it, I'll take it, and I'll give them credit, but I'll take ownership of it and share it. And so I would say that, there are going to be a lot of soul-searching moments here for us as a society to figure out how we want to address the moment. If you thought back just for a minute, if I could
Sure.
just take this in a little direction and just use this as context. If I looked at public opinion polls from 8 years ago and said, what were 3 things that people were most interested in or most concerned about in our city of Oakland? And I could say with fairness, it was probably crime. It was probably, jobs, job creation and employment stability, would be education. And for a time in Oakland, I'd say for 20 years prior to the poll 8 years ago, that was all a true statement. And we could say that was what happened 10 years prior and 15 years prior. And now if we said, what's a poll that, we took a poll and said, what are the 3 things that concern you most? I think it's fair to say that people would say homelessness is a big issue, which in the last several years has become more prescient and more desperate and more of a crisis. I would say that without question now, public health is on everyone's mind, and therefore healthcare is a big part of that conversation. And the difficulties and the limit to access, as well as the ability of existing systems to support a population in need. Now, because 26 million people have been laid off, and I want to clarify my view that I have a lot of friends, and I'm sure you do too as well, Zinni, who are people who don't necessarily fill out their paperwork in a timely manner, who might procrastinate just a little bit. And so there are 26 million people who are for unemployment. How many people who are unemployed who have not filed yet? And so what's that number really going to end up being? And that's not including the people who have been unable to file due to various technicalities because they're in the gig economy or over self-employed. And we've heard announcements about how California is taking steps to make unemployment available to a larger universe of people. So we have a big number that we're dealing with. So I think employment and job creation is going to once again become a big issue.
Huge issue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
With the election in November, these issues are how Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Did I lose you? Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
That happens.
These issues.
Yeah.
I think someone's served office of how you're going to deal with employment, how you're going to deal with healthcare,
Right.
public health. Those are all
Right.
completely fair game issues of the day.
You mentioned. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's what I see. That's what's on the horizon.
You mentioned.
You're cutting out a little bit on you, so I'm losing
It comes and goes. It's part of. There's a lot of people using, and so it's a pipeline issue. It happens. We just played through. What happens is that the volume actually winds up going through. Hold on a second. Phil will be back. That's a technical issue. I think his phone somehow wind up unmuting, but what he'll do is he'll come back. I'm just right. I'm texting him to say it's tech. Try again. Happens during busy period. But still on. Okay, but still on. Anyway, Phil was basically saying that if we can get him back there, and I'll put him on a side here until he's ready to come back here. But what he's saying is that we have a situation where there are a number of friends that we have who are suffering. And what's happened is that, and what I was going to say to Phil is that some people don't know that you can fill out an application for the payroll protection program and actually succeed. They assume before they try it, hey, it's not going to work for me. I didn't make enough money. I was paid under the table. And what I tell people again and again and again, as I'm saying right here, and by the way, if you have questions, you can actually type them into the comment section and listen. Pure and simple, that you simply have to give the system a chance to work and make sure you fill out the application completely. It's a matter of how you fill out the application. If you answer the questions completely, put in your social security number, if you have an employer identification number, which means you have a separate company. If you don't have a separate company, you can't do it. It's not legal. Then you don't. But what I found is that if you put yourself in the system with this pandemic, the Small Business Administration and the bank that you work with, I work with Bank of America right now, but Oakland Summit Bank has managed to get payroll protection program assistance for all of their clients. You will get the assistance you need. And I heard some other people say, well, that money is not for me. It's for somebody else like you. You have a business. And these are folks who say they're okay now, but the nature of the business they're in is flimsy such that they may not be in the near future. And I hope that's not the case. So I say to everybody, make sure that you have different avenues where you can gain the financial assistance you need, because otherwise there'll be a problem. We don't know, and it's really sad to say, we don't know how long the effort's going to go on for, and at some point we got to figure out how to get over this, and we have to have a timeline. And this is where the government comes in, I think, on the federal level, that says, all right, we will be at X point, we expect to be Y. Give the nation a set of guideposts on where we should be and how we're going to get there, so that we can bring the entire nation some comfort, and the world that the United States understands what it's doing, and has a plan. Hey, if we don't, you can adjust the plan, right? But that's the important thing. Let me see. One moment, please. See if I can get him back there. Hey, trying in. You got trying in? Yeah, I'll just give it a shot. Yeah, we're still going. Yeah. Yeah. So he's coming back. So anyway, as I said, technical difficulties. Whenever there are technical difficulties with your guest, always give them a call. So, what I'm saying is that the country should give us that guidepost, but on a personal level, every grant program, every type of here's Phil. Welcome back, Phil.
Well, thank you, Denny.
Sure. I was picking up where you left off, and what I was saying to people is that a number of friends that we have say the programs won't work for me. This is more for you, Zenny. You have a business. And I encourage them. I said, look, just get yourself in the system, because they really do want to put money into your accounts. It's not like they're trying to be blankety blanks. But I know that when I signed up for the PPP, on 5 different pages, they asked you the same question about criminal background. Fine, I don't have an issue. But I just thought it was interesting that it was like one of these things that was repeated again and again and again. Somebody else might have an issue, may get scared off by that, So, but
I would say that in our case, and I would more specifically my case for Ume Yoga, as our local bank was very helpful. The paperwork is pretty straightforward, and I've had a pretty long history of filling out forms for all the various projects I've had to work on. So we weren't uncomfortable doing that, and we're grateful. And it all took place in a reasonable amount of time. We had also been lucky enough to have, I would say minimal impact, because we were prepared to cover our employees' salaries for 30 days, not knowing, of course, that this was going to go on for much longer. And, let's say when it's all said and done, maybe we end up 90 days where we've been unable to operate. That's a huge impact, and takes us right to the limits of this small business. And again, as I shared with you earlier, there's some small businesses that I've talked to who've already made the decision not to reopen, and many others who are going to figure that out when they know what the rules are. So improved dialogue and communication as to what's required, I think, is essential. But I'm going to go back and say, without question, promoting public safety, health and safety, and understanding what's required to do it responsibly is going to come first. And so Dr. Pan at Alameda County and the local building officials and others that are going to have to not only communicate and educate the public, but people who are then going to be a part of, I would say, enforcing what those rules are going to be taking everyone through that process to make sure that they have a plan in place, that they've thought it through, that they've trained their employees, and prepared for something that's new and different.
I'm used to the city taking action in terms of economic development. Are you satisfied with what the city is doing in terms of its economic development capability. Now, the reason why I ask is I remember in 1992, I wrote a column for the Montclarian. I was a columnist, and I wrote one that was critical of this using its reserves or not using them. And then Craig Hoshin set up this special item on the agenda to basically show that the reserves are really projects. There wasn't just money laying around. But on that note, I'm thinking, well, why not just cut those projects and then take that and then assist businesses? Your thoughts?
Well, let me first say that, we had enjoyed a 11 and a half year sustained recovery from the recession. And so we basically saw an economy that we have not seen in our lifetimes as far as its length without interruption. And Oakland saw record revenues, not only from sales tax, but also from property transfers, and enjoyed that. And that the monies were programmed and used, and city tended to run, and I don't want to misstate this if it's not true, but my general understanding was the city ran into a series of deficit years where there were certain things that went over budget. And present, the city and has in excess of a $50 million projected budget deficit. And there have been a lot of articles written about how desperate things are. The county is in a very similar circumstances. And the county now was 1.6 million people.
It's a lot of money, a lot of people. Sorry, quite a bit.
Primary.
Mm-hmm. Phil's actually talking about the county. There he is. He was talking about the county and the county's healthcare burden at the time, and that we had the pipeline issue there. And so he was talking about the county's burden on healthcare at the time and the pipeline issue there. It's a big problem. And what I'm saying is that the city has an economic development arm that historically has had a great business assistance program. Here's Phil. And there he is. And you were saying, Phil, about the Alameda County and healthcare and with respect to economic development. And let me see. I think,
and so it happens. So we just played through. What happens is that
he's got
volume winds up going through. Hold on a second.
Yeah. So he's watching. Yeah, he'll hear my question, and then he'll hear the question, and he'll realize, oh, hey, we're here. So it is. At any rate, my first job out of grad school was with economic development, and we had, hey, Phil, and we see you. And so, hey, we see you. Say something. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
The audio is breaking up, and so it's a little rough.
It happens. Welcome to the show.
Zoom. I don't know how to reach out to So before I lose you again, Zinni, I appreciate the time. I look forward to doing it again
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
any topic. And I'm sorry that we've had technical difficulties. Knowing that I'm quite the Luddite, it's
Oh, no.
probably on my end.
It's not. It's the, you know what's going on is there are a lot of people on this, and so StreamYard Zoom's got some weird text. Everybody, and so I'm really trying to find the best solution, and I'll find it by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
Phil, we're coming back at you soon, and God bless, man.
Okay, take care. Stay safe. Okay.
You got it, man. I'll see you. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, cool. Okay, see ya. Hey, folks, so that was Phil, but I want to emphasize something for those who may be still on. Phil has been a longtime friend. He's partnered with Insight Terminal Solutions, which is my client. He introduced me to them. I wanted them as a client, and I'll tell you why, because there's a lot of truth about the Oakland Oversized terminal that was covered up by the mainstream media. And for example, the fact that the city of Oakland identified secured coal for Phil. I had no intention of talking about that on our broadcast, but I want everyone to know because we're a full disclosure organization, unlike, for example, Dr. Oz. That is one of our clients, Insight Terminal Solutions, that he's partnered with, and as is Flowcent and a number of other. We had Maria Kaplan as a client at that point as well. So anyway, that's where it is. Zenny 62 Media helps you tell your story. But in this instance, this happened because Phil was posting on Facebook about media not getting out the story. And I said, hey, we're at Zenny 62 Media, we're doing that. And I had a number of people on Oakland Councilman Lauren Taylor, among others, and to tell the story. So thank you all for coming, and subscribe to Zenny 62 on YouTube if you haven't done so before already. Hey, thanks. See ya. And thanks, John Marks. See ya. I want to write thank you. And John, I agree. I hope and pray everyone in Oakland stays safe as well. Thanks. I'll be back.